Hello everybody, this is part 2 of the Excel EPS project. So at this point you should have already completed the basic EPS information, and before proceeding you should wait for a sign off on your weighted average shares and your income to shareholders and your basic EPS, because if that's incorrect nothing else will be correct going forward. So what we're going to do though in this part is focus on the diluted EPS calculation, and the first part of that is calculating the per share effect of each security. So what I've put in here for you is most of it. I added this thing called issue ID so that we can use a VLOOKUP later. Here's a description of the securities, and I've separated it into a panel with preferred stocks and bonds because they're kind of similar. Warrants are totally different. So they use the treasury stock method. For these securities, we're going to use the if converted method. The only difference between the stock and the bond is for the bonds, we're going to have to make a tax adjustment because interest is tax deductible. Preferred stock dividends are not. Excuse me. But here's all the information that should conform to what was given to you. The two red ones are the conversion ratios that you've chosen. And I left this time waiting open. All of them are 1 except this one, and I left that open to complete it. Okay, and these are all going to be calculated over here. I kept the basic EPS here as a reference, and I'll refer to the tax rate from another worksheet. Okay, so the time waiting is, let's see what we have here. We go back to the instructions, and it tells you that bond B is issued on 6/1. Okay, so if it's issued on June 1, that means there's 7 months remaining. So this is going to be 7/12, and in the prior one you learned how to format that as a 12th. Now the numerator, which is the change in income attributable to shareholders, is going to be the amount of preferred stock outstanding times the dividend rate times the preferred par value. Okay, now an easier way to do this is you'd also have to take into consideration is the amount you undid. So really the safest way to do this is to go back to your basic EPS and just click on preferred adjustment. So this one was non-cumulative. Let me make sure, is that what I picked? Non-cumulative 0. Yes, that's what I chose. So as a result, we picked the actual dividend that they received. So what you're undoing is whatever was subtracted from EPS for basic. Now you're adding it back, or you may be adding it back. We'll have to see. But to calculate the per share effect, we're definitely putting it in there as the numerator. Okay, and the denominator, they get 2 shares of common for every 1 share preferred. So that would be 8 million total. And the per share effect is just denominator divided by numerator. Okay, and then we'll come back to this dilutive test. The other thing we have to have in here is the time waiting factor. So that won't change it in this case, but just to be consistent. So this, for the basic EPS, it won't be relevant. For the interest, it will be. Because this is the actual dividend regardless of time factor. All right, so for the bond, I'm going to start with the time weighting, just put it out front. It's the face value. These are assumed issued at par, times the interest rate, times 1 minus the tax rate. And let's see where that is, right here. I don't know what kind of typo it found, but all right. So this one is going to be fixed. So I'm going to select it and I'm going to hit F4. So it's fixed. Everything else is relative, so I could do this, and this one is 560, and it should have the 7/12. And this one should be the same, but that is not. 63 F3 C3. Oh, of course, I got to fix my conversion ratio here. All right, so we're going to start with the time weighting factor, times it by the conversion ratio, so that's how many shares for every bond, and then we have to calculate the number of bonds, which is 30 million divided by the face value of 30 million divided by 1,000, which is the face value of one bond. So bonds trade in $1,000 increments. This is not made up for your class. This is how they actually trade, and so it's 1.2 million shares, 1.166667 shares, and the per share effect. Okay. So now let's go down here and do the warrants. Warrants are totally different. The test for whether they're dilutive or anti-dilutive is comparing the strike price to the average share price. So if you had you could strike price at 4. So if you had the option, you could buy it at 4, and then in the market during the year it traded at 10. That would make sense to possibly exercise that option. So whenever the strike price is less than the market price during the year, it's dilutive. In the second case, the strike price is 12. Average market price during the year is 10. So that would be anti-dilutive. So we have to put an if statement in here. And let me start down here with the one that's anti-dilutive. So if strike price is greater than average share price, then what are we going to put? I'm going to say, what did I tell you? I said NA over there. Okay, that's what we'll do. That's what I told you to do. So we're going to stick to that. Otherwise, the income, this is the easy part, is always 0 whenever it's anti-dilutive because there's no per share effect. Excuse me, there's no income effect for warrants, for options. Okay, the denominator, it's a little more confusing. So we have to go with our if statement again. So if this is greater than the average market price during the year, then it's N/A. Otherwise, we're going to calculate the number of shares that would have been issued had they been exercised. They were not exercised, but if they'd been exercised. All right, so we're going to use this weighting based upon the market price relative to the strike price. So first of all, we'll take the 5 million options, but we're not going to have the full 5 million net issued because the treasury stock method says act as if you take the cash from the proceeds and you buy back as many shares as possible. So 10 minus 4 is $6. So net, you're getting 4, but net it means you're issuing 60. Okay, so this is 10 minus 4 is 6 over 10, which means that 60% net are issued. Otherwise, it's telling you you're buying back 40%, which means 60% net was issued. 60% of 5 million is 3 million. And the per share effect, you take this down here, and the per share effect is the same. Okay. Oh, so we got to put an if statement here as well. So if, we'll just go off of this one, maybe we can see if this will work. If NA, so when you use a logical test with text, you have to put it in quotes, but also has to be exactly the same wording. If NA, then NA, otherwise we will calculate our EPS. So let me put that one in here. Looks good. All right. Relative is a dilutive relative to EPS. So we want an if statement. If this is less than basic, then the answer is yes. Otherwise, it's no. Oh, what am I doing? We want to do ones and zeros for yes and no. Just with using the numbers, it's sometimes easier to compare. And we have to make this canine fixed F4. Okay. So 125, 90, yeah, those are all pretty low relative to basic. All right, so in the next video, what I will do is the ranking, and maybe we'll get all the way to diluted EPS, but we'll certainly at least get through the ranking.